We have worked on asking and answering questions with who, what, when, and where. Now we will focus on some other question words. It is critical to understand what a question is asking and how to answer it. We will become familiar with these question words and learn exactly how to answer these types of questions. Look at the examples on the board. Is, are, do, does. Turn to page 15 in your student books. We have written questions about these pictures using who, what, when, and where. Let me ask you some questions about the few of these pictures using our new question words. Is the baby smiling? Are people walking in the park? Do you see a dog? Does a watch tell time? Questions beginning with is, are, do, or does are all answered with yes or no and an explanation. I already pointed out that proficient readers preview the text for text features such as headings and graphics. They also reread text slowly and carefully to gain understanding. Proficient readers monitor their thinking while reading to be sure that each sentence and paragraph makes sense. They look for answers to big idea questions such as how are bats useful to humans and how are humans impacting bats? What else do proficient readers do? They ask themselves and others questions about their reading. Proficient readers also discuss those questions with others. Turn to page 14 in your student books. You are about to learn a little bit more about asking good questions. The heading on page 14 is Question Words. The top of the page provides hints on how to answer questions. The chart at the bottom of the page lists signal words or question words that you can use to ask good questions. Let me explain the chart. The words in the left column are used to start the question. The right column lets you know what information is needed to answer the question. For example, if I ask, is it almost lunchtime? Your answer to the question would begin with yes or no and tell why. If I ask, when do bats sleep? Your answer would include some reference to time. Let's do one more. If I ask, where is the largest bat colony? Your answer would include some reference to a place. This time, when we read Batty about bats, we will ask questions about the text. Doing this helps you understand what is important. We will also answer the questions that we ask. Turn to pages 4 and 5 in your student books. Let's do what proficient readers do and reread Batty about bats with a focus on asking and answering questions. Remember what you do when we read. Your eyes need to track or follow the text while your pencil points to the words. While you're busy looking and pointing to the text, your brain is busy looking for patterns and making meaning. While listening, be aware of questions that come to your mind and questions that you can ask others. You will each take turns reading aloud the different sections. Eyes ready? Pencil ready? Let's begin. We're now going to read Flying and Feeding. Turn to page 23 in your student books. Here is a question chart similar to the one we just discussed. Use this to help you guide your questioning. Think about the text. What question do you have, or what should your peers have learned about bats from this section? You are going to choose one question word in the chart to begin your question. Consider starting your question with is or are or what. Write the question on the page. Be prepared to answer your question orally. Now let's look back at the passage. We will be reading Super Sonar. Eyes ready? Pencil ready? Let's begin. Now let's turn back to page 23. Choose a different question word for this section. Try using is or are or when. Write the question on the page. Be prepared to answer your question orally. Now it's time to read Hanging Out and Helping. Eyes ready? Pencil ready? Let's begin. Now turn back to page 23 in your student books. Let's ask more questions. It will be more difficult, but try using a question word that you haven't used yet. Try using do or does or where. Write the question on the page. Be prepared to answer your question orally. Now let's look back at the passage. Read Bats in Trouble. Eyes ready? Pencil ready? Let's begin. Now let's turn back to page 23. Write your last question on the page. Try using do or does or who for this question. Be prepared to answer your question orally. Now I want you to, as partners, read your questions to each other and answer them aloud. Now turn to page 24 in your student books. Now we will answer other questions about Batty about bats for more practice. Some of the questions may be similar to questions that you already asked and answered. You are going to read each question. You will identify and underline the question word. You will use the question words chart on page 14 to review the type of information required to respond to the question. You will use text headings or other text features to locate the content needed to answer the question. You will reread the section to retrieve exact information for text evidence. You will use the question word to formulate a response. You will identify part of the response that replaces the question word. You will provide evidence from the text with the answer to the question. Let's look at our first question. Is a bat a mammal? If the question asks is, the answer must include yes or no. I can look at the text to find the answer. On page 4, it says that bats are mammals. This is the text evidence, so the answer is yes. However, I want to make sure that my answer is enough for me to look at and learn from, so I need to include part of the question in my answer. Yes, a bat is a mammal. And my text evidence is where it says bats are mammals. Let's look at the second question. Are all bats bug eaters? What is the question word in this sentence? How do we answer a question that begins with "are"? Let's use the sentence frame to answer the question. No, all bats are not bug eaters. Can you find the text evidence in the second paragraph on page 4? There are two sentences that help prove that all bats are not bug eaters. Some eat fruits and flowers. Some eat frogs and fish. Now you're going to answer the remaining questions and include the text evidence. I am going to put the questions and the question starters on the board, or the answer starters on the board. Are bats blind? And your response will either be yes or no. Bats, it will either be are blind or are not blind. Are bats able to see with sound? Are colonies where bats live? Are bats helpful to farmers? Are bats in danger? Now I want you to complete the rest of page 24.